Okay, good evening, members. Welcome to the meeting of Social Services and Scrutiny Committee held on Monday, the 1st of November. Sorry, but things keep disappearing on me, and I do apologise. The recording will be made available to view via the Council's website, except for discussions involving confidential or exempt items. Therefore, the images, audio of those individuals speaking will be publicly available to all via the recording on the Council website at www.caerphilly.gov.uk. Okay, can we have apologies, please? And would Scrutiny Manager take a roll call?
Yes, Chair. We do have apologies from Councillor Angel, and I will go through the roll call of the committee members in the first instance. I can see Councillor John Bevan's not present, so Councillor Bazina.
Here.
Councillor Bishop.
Here.
Councillor Cushin.
Here.
Councillor Etheridge.
Present.
Councillor Evans.
Here.
Councillor Gay. And Guy.
Yeah.
Councillor Gale doesn't seem to be here at the moment. Councillor Haas is not here. Councillor James.
Here.
I can see Councillor James is here. Councillor Jeremiah.
Here.
No Councillor Leonard. Councillor Skibbons.
Yeah.
Councillor Thomas.
Yeah.
Councillor Williams.
Yeah.
Councillor Cook, the Cabinet Member.
Morning. Morning. Afternoon. What time it is now?
and we have co-opted members, Michelle Jones.
Yes, I'm here.
Cyril Luke.
Yes.
And Patricia Cook.
Yeah.
That's the members of the committee, Chair.
Okay, thanks, thank you, Kath. Right, can we proceed then with the agenda? Agenda item number 2, declarations of interest. Councillors and officers are reminded of their personal responsibility to declare any personal and or prejudicial interests in respect to any item of business on this agenda, in accordance with the Local Government Act 2000, the Council's Constitution and the Code of Conduct for both councillors and officers. Do we have any declarations of interest, please? Sorry, I'm having to flick through screens again. Okay, so we have no declarations. Okay, so we go on to agenda item 3 now. Social Services Scrutiny Committee meeting held on the 13th of September 2021. Okay, for accuracy, we'll go through page by page. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. And page 5. Okay, can we have a proposer and a seconder, please?
I propose, Chair, Councillor Williams.
Okay.
And Councillor Bishop.
Okay, can we go to Microsoft Forms now for the voting, please?
Chair, can I just say I'm abstaining as I was not present at the previous meeting with Councillor James.
Okay. All voting completed?
Chair, that's moved.
Okay then. Before we move on to agenda item 4, I'd just like to say there's going to be a bit of a switch around this evening. After agenda item 7, we will then move straight on to agenda item 10. so that we have somebody here who's been invited to speak on behalf of some issues in agenda item 10. So we will move on to agenda item 10 and then proceed with the rest of the agenda. Okay, we're on item 4 now. Considerations of any matter referred to this committee in accordance with the call-in procedure. Has there been any matters arising?
No, none, Chair.
Okay then, item 5, Social Services and Scrutiny Committee Forward Work Plan. I assume that's pages 7 to 18. Chair to ask Scrutiny Manager to introduce. Oh, can you introduce them, please?
Yes, Chair, thank you very much.
Sorry, Karen. I'm reading the well-versed script you've given me. I do apologise.
Thank you, Chair. I just direct members to the Appendix 1 on the report, which outlines the next 2 meetings of the committee. We have the meeting planned for the 23rd of November. As members will see, there's the presentation from Aneurin and Bevan University Health Board. And we also have the report for the Task and Finish group on non-residential care charges and the regional partnership update. We also have an information item that will be circulated to you on the Youth Justice Board. The meeting after that will be the 25th of January when you have the budget report, and the meeting on the 8th of March has got planned a Directorate Performance Assessment. I don't have any indication of any additional items at this present time, so if members are happy with the current work programme, we'll go ahead and publish it on the Council's website. Thank you.
Yeah, I know I've said to you in the pre-meeting, Kath, but you're going to have to give my apologies for the meeting on the 23rd of November, as I have a family matter abroad that I have to deal with.
Yeah, I've noted that, Chair.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Okay, then, are there any questions on agenda item 5, please? Any questions on the forward work plan? Okay then. So can we have a mover and a seconder, and then we'll go to forms?
Hi, Chair, it's Councillor Evans. I could move that.
Okay, second.
I second, Chair. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Walter. Right, can we go to Microsoft Forms then for the voting, please?
That's moved, Chair.
Okay, thanks then, Kath. Item 6 is to receive and consider the following cabinet reports. Has there been any cabinet reports?
No,
Kath?
no, they haven't been called forward, Chair.
Been any called forward?
No, Councillor James has got his hand up, Chair.
Okay, Councillor James?
Thanks, Chair. Can I just confirm that my poll voting is being registered? It seems to have some problems.
Chair, looking at the numbers, as long as everybody who's voted are committee members, we got unanimous on that, but
right,
we will
okay.
double check it, and if you're not showing, we will add you to the list, Councillor
Okay.
James.
Thanks.
Okay. Do you want to put your hand down now, Councillor James? Thank you. Okay, then we move on then to item 7, which is to receive a notice of motion regarding day centres. I believe we have Councillor Colin Mann and Dave Street, who's the acting chief executive, to bring this matter to the meeting. Colin?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Chair. Good evening, members. That's with that. I'm sure everyone has read the motion, so there's no point in me wasting your time by reading that out again. But just to explain where it's coming from, Chair, I've submitted this motion in order to respond to the serious concerns expressed by a large number of carers looking after vulnerable family members. I believe that everyone understands the need to respond to the pandemic, but the cause of concern, as I understand it, is a failure to move in a meaningful way towards restoring the services previously available. I have been told of vulnerable adults who are now receiving just 3 hours per week. I repeat, 3 hours, when they previously had 5 days provision. I believe this applies in many cases. I've spoken to carers who are seriously considering placing relatives into assisted living as they are unable to cope with the new reduced provision. And this, of course, would be far more expensive for the authority if that happened. Many were offended by the botched consultation that was carried out during the pandemic, and I do welcome the fact that a proper consultation has now been promised. I believe that a lot of the despair felt by so many centres around the absence of any prospect of meaningfully increasing the hours of provision. I repeat something that has been said to me on more than one occasion. This is not a 5-day-a-week job. It is 24/7 by 365 days with very little respite. The withdrawal of daycare has meant that a lifeline for carers has been taken away, and that I believe is the reason for the despair and indeed anger. I do not underestimate the difficulties that I have explained by the Assistant Director, but it is imperative to find a way forward and give these people some hope for a brighter future. Diolch yn fawr, Chair.
Thank you, Colin. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Mr. Street, regarding this motion?
Just one item, if I may, Chair. Clearly, notice of motions are political mandates. I understand that, and I wouldn't ordinarily comment on a notice of motion. However, in paragraph 4, there is reference to social services officers determined to drive through changes, whatever the short and long-term impact on carers are. I can't let that go unchallenged. You'll see some of the challenges that officers have faced when we come on to the report at item 10. This has all been done for the right intentions in the most difficult of circumstances. I think Councillor Mann's absolutely right. The consequences of that on individuals and individuals' families have been immense, and we certainly haven't underestimated that. What we have tried to do is the best in the most difficult circumstances that I've ever known in my career in social care. And I'm afraid I can't let that reference to officers, because I've seen it every day. I've seen what people like Jo Williams and her staff have done to get us through the last 2 months. And I'm afraid I can't let that go unchallenged. I fundamentally disagree with it. But ultimately, clearly, it's a notice of motion. It's a matter for you as members. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, do you mind if I respond?
Just actually ask you if you'd like to come back on that, please, Councillor Mann.
Yeah. I think this was the feeling at the time the motion was written. It is not meant to be party political. Maybe that came out as being party political. But when I spoke to the motion, I certainly didn't intend to be political. And I recognise that in some ways, in a number of ways, the situation has moved on. But I think we have some way to go, and that is why I phrased my comments in the way that I did. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Right, Kevin, I think you'd like to ask something.
Yes,
in relation to your recent email.
Yeah, Councillor Mann will know of my disappointment. I was hoping that we could have tabled a joint motion, and there's been a number of emails and conversations between myself and Councillor Mann. The sentiments of the motion is not a problem. You know, I agree with that. There's certain comments, and I endorse what the acting chief executive have said. To actually have a go at the staff at the time is, I don't believe, acceptable. And, you know, Councillor Mann have said he didn't mention it, but I would have liked to seen that paragraph sort of withdrawn and we all sort of work together. I therefore, Chair, would like to put an amendment to the motion. And the amendment, I've emailed the members. It's looking for us all to work in partnership, drive this forward and work together. In view of the recent concerns raised by users and carers at a public meeting and a petition of over 1,000 names, and the worry, distress, anxiety, upset and stress caused for many in our community, we are pleased that the authorities have recognised that the original consultation exercise was withdrawn, and a more effective, robust exercise will be undertaken by an independent person with all stakeholders, users and families. We therefore call for all parties to work together in order to work in partnership, and I would like to see a working group set up with specific terms of reference to monitor and evaluate progress in regarding fairness and consistency. The group would therefore be chaired by Councillor Cook as the Cabinet member. They would be members of the Scrutiny, limited numbers, carers and users, officers from social services and a union rep, with the chair of the Caerphilly People's First. A report will then be produced by the independent assessor with recommendations for evaluation and consideration with options going forward. And there will be regular engagement with all parties. Now, I think this is the way forward. Now, obviously, I'm the only independent on the committee, so I will need somebody to propose and second it. If they don't, there we are. But I do feel, Chair...
Actually, Kevin, I think a point there is that as the original motion, notice of motion, and if you need to have any additions added onto that notice of motion, then we have to consult with the original person who wrote the motion, which was Councillor Mann. So, Councillor Mann, would you like to come in on this matter, please?
I'm not clear whether this is an amendment, Chair, or replacement. Possibly Councillor Etheridge can explain.
This is an amendment to the actual motion. It's an actual amendment motion. So my understanding, and perhaps the officer could confirm, if you put an amendment down to the motion, this motion would replace the original one if it's proposed and seconded and voted on.
Right. Now, can I have some legal advice on this, Kat? Because my understanding in standing orders that I don't know whether or not if it's an amendment or an addition to motion, that they have to seek consultation from the original person who submitted the notice of motion.
Oh, yes, Chair, certainly. After I saw Councillor Etheridge's proposal, I did check the Constitution, and if I could just find it a moment. Excuse me a minute. It's in 11.4 in part 4. It basically says that the signatories to the motion, i.e. Councillor Mann, would have to agree to the amendment, and the chair would have to agree that whether the alteration was significant or not. So if you consider as a chair that it's a significant alteration, you can reject it as an amendment. But if you're happy to accept it, that it's not significant, you can accept it as long as Councillor Mann is agreeable to it as an amendment.
Right. Well, the terminology, as far as I can see, isn't actually significant enough, because the terminology is similar in regards that we all have concerns for our constituents out there. So I can't see that there is any significant changes to the actual motion. The only thing that I will say is that I'm agreeable to have additions to the motion, but obviously that has to go down if Councillor Mann is acceptable to that, regarding setting up a consultation group, a meeting group with the Councillor Shane Cook chairing it. That's obviously if he's willing, but obviously it's on the say-so of Councillor Mann what we would add to the motion. Councillor Mann?
Thanks, Chair. I don't wish to stand in the way of the committee. If the committee wish to discuss and accept either my motion or an amended motion or whatever, I mean, I'm quite happy to go along with that. I just wondering about the timing of the working party. If the say we have now been promised a far better consultation than we had originally. I'm just wondering how this would tie in with the consultation that the department is doing.
I think personally we have to wait for what the consultation comes back and says, and then we have the working party. I don't know if people are agreeable to that, but we have to go back to what the motion is. Do we add about the working party to the motion? And additionally, I think Mr. Street mentioned about removing about the social services officers determined to drive through changes. I think he felt that that was somewhat well, contrary to what he believes in, because obviously he believes that all his staff have worked very hard, you know, to implement changes and to keep up support as they should be. So I think we have to address the fourth paragraph of the consultation, which it states, this consultation seems to be merely window dressing with social services officers determined to drive through changes, whatever the short and long-term impact on carers and their family members. That section. And also then about having a working group following the consultation, which is to be added to the motion. Now, do we vote first, Kath, on amendments, but should we have a full and frank discussion first? Because I know we've got a number of hands up first.
Chair, would it help if I'm quite happy to take out that sentence, the one that seems to be and with the director's assurance, but I say that was the perception at the time. Things have moved on, and we now have the assurance from the director. So that second sentence of the fourth paragraph, I'm quite happy to take out if that helps.
I think Mr. Street would be agreeable to that. And
Chair, just for the record, thank you, Councillor Mann. You know, clearly I felt the need to comment on that. I wasn't in one way, in any way, suggesting that Councillor Mann should remove it. That's ultimately a matter of Councillor Mann. If he wishes to do that, that's fine. But I felt it would have been wrong for me not to comment on that particular part of the notice of motion. But clearly it isn't my job as an officer to suggest amended wording. That is a matter for members.
No, Chair, recognising the fact that things have moved on, I repeat my offer to take out that sentence if it helps.
Okay, I think you were just about to come in there.
Yeah, Chair. All I would say is that we would make it clear to the committee. I don't know if you want to listen for everybody first.
Yeah, that's
then
right.
We'll read out the revised motion, which is what Councillor Mann, with the sentence removed that's been suggested, adding in the addition from Councillor Etheridge. And that would be put forward as an amended motion. You'd have to have it moved and seconded and then take that to a vote. And then depending on whether it's successful or not, that would become the substantive motion.
Okay,
If it fails, you then go back to the original motion from Councillor Mann.
But I think there would be an original motion with an amendment removing that particular sentence. So that would actually be so there'll be two amendments. The first amendment includes everything. The second amendment is to withdraw the second sentence of the fourth paragraph. And the third one would be the original motion. Is that correct?
But if the amended motions the amendment is approved, successful, then you have a substantive motion which you would put to a vote. Okay,
lovely. Yep. Right then, can we go on then? In order that it popped up on my screen, Councillor Bazina.
Thanks, Chair. Wow, my brain is just trying to get to grasp what was just said. So I just had a question really about Councillor Mann's motion. But if we're voting now on the amendments, then that's fine. It's just I just had a query.
Okay, so your query wouldn't pertain then to the amendment if it was successful.
It is a really difficult, complex one, isn't it? And you know, I think we've all been impacted by COVID. and even far more so with the vulnerable people that we support in the community. But what alarms me is that no thought has been given to any kind of risk assessment around the issue with COVID, on opening up the day centres. And, you know, as a person who was shielding, you know, it concerns me that opening up day services just now, where, you know, you only heard the First Minister last week speaking about the situation in Wales. I was just wanting to ask really about, you know, has anyone thought about a risk assessment? Because that's my big concern.
I think actually, when I was reading the Social Services COVID-19 position statement, there was in there about the substantive risk assessment they have to do in regards to centres. Am I correct in that, Mr. Street?
You are indeed, Chair, and that's something I know we'll cover when we reach item 10 on the agenda.
Okay, does that answer your question then?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Cyril, I think you've got your hand up next.
Yes, I've got 3 points. First of all, who are the day centres for? Are they for the carers, or are they for the people with learning disabilities? Have a think about that one now. And at the moment, people going to day centres don't move on. And we as an organisation have moved lots of people on. What the management of social services are doing is trying to encourage people to move on, not just stay in the day centres for the rest of their life. And I believe, having been in learning disabilities for 30 years, that what social services managers are doing is the right way forward. I agree with complex needs. They need, but have anybody asked the people themselves what they want? Because I spoke to a lot of them and they don't want to go back 5 days a week to a day centre. They want it. They like going out and about like this happening now. So any comments, let me know.
Okay, thanks, Cyril. You know, that may be so with regarding to some of the people you may have spoken to, but there are others out there who are very reliant on the day services, and the day centres actually do take them out and about. And I think it's not just there for maybe the users, the end users, but also for the carers as well, because they take that opportunity to do things which they can't do when they're there 24 hours a day looking after, you know, the family member. So anyway, I don't know if anybody else wants to answer a comment on that one. It's just I'm looking at it from a different point of view, from what I've seen and what people have actually said to me anyway. So I think next one on my list now is Councillor Cook.
Hi, Chair. Thanks for letting me come in. Can you see me? My camera's playing up. Yeah, brilliant, great. You might not know, but today Caerphilly is the second highest COVID infection rate in Wales. It stands at 408 cases per 1,000 population. Yeah, I urge members not to vote for Councillor Mann's motion, as it's irresponsible to return to providing a full service of hours at day centres in this current time. In doing so, we will be ignoring COVID risk assessments and Welsh Government COVID regulations. We all have a responsibility to protect the vulnerable, users, family and staff. This shouldn't be a political football, which has become. I just urge everyone to think about this now. These vulnerable users and families that use these day centres, we've got to be very careful what we're doing. Thank you.
Any comment on that? I have, but I won't. I'll refrain. Okay, can I have who's popped up on my list now? Councillor Evans. Mark Evans?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Okay, I had the same concerns as Carmen says, but Councillor Cook has just emphasised a few things about COVID and everything's still going on, so I'm happy with that bit. But there was something now that Councillor Etheridge has asked about with the working party, and I just wanted a little bit of information from either the Cabinet member or Dave Street. So I wanted to know their opinions on whether or not the issue could be looked at by an independent review panel, so a panel that's made up of experts, so they can ensure that we have a quality, an appropriateness and a balance for us to then scrutinise afterwards instead of a working party. So what are their opinions on whether or not we have a working party or an independent review?
Mr. Street, would you like to respond?
Sorry, Councillor Evans, I'm not absolutely sure what you're proposing here. An independent review of what exactly?
Right. So Councillor Etheridge asked about setting up a working party. Yeah. To look at the issues. But I just wanted to know whether or not you thought the working party would be okay, or whether or not, for instance, we had a panel of independent experts, so everybody that come from the same field, and they could give us maybe a little bit more knowledge than what I could give.
Yeah, sorry, I
that
follow
make
you.
sense?
Yeah, follow you completely now.
Right, sorry about that then earlier.
Yeah, I think there would be some merit in there, whether it be a panel or an organisation, but I think we felt very early on that bringing an external view would be helpful. And I think, as was touched on in the debate regarding Councillor Etheridge's amendments, for that sort of independent body or individual, whatever it is, then actually to report back to a group of members, which actually I believe should be Scrutiny Committee anyway. I mean, that is the role of Scrutiny Committee. So I'm not sure why we'd bring another group of members together other than over and above what we've already got. But I think there would be some merit in bringing an organisation in that has got some expertise in certainly working with people with a learning disability. But equally, we have to remember that the majority of you people who use day services in Caerphilly are actually older people. So we've got to remember that as well. So we would have to pick our individuals carefully.
Okay, thanks. Mark, got anything else to say? Could your hand still up?
Sorry, Chair, I just forgot to put it back down.
Okay. Now, I don't know if this is Cyril, but I've got on my list here Caerphilly PF guest with their hand still up. Is that you, Cyril? Or is that somebody else? No? Okay. Councillor Skivins?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just want to say a couple of things. This has been a long-term issue, and there was a real attempt right from the commencement of it being joint working and not being political. But given the length of time and the protracted nature on responses to a number of the queries, we as representatives have to respond to concerns of our residents out there, and particularly the families and carers of disabled persons. And just to go on, if this issue had been brought, if there had been a potential change in social service care, if that matter had been raised with councillors in the first place before we'd gone out to a consultation, whether the consultation was good or bad is slightly irrelevant at this point, but would we be in the place that we are in today? Because it would have been a far broader conversation. I just want to pick up on a point that Dave Street has mentioned. I don't think anybody belittles the impact that it's had on his officers, but I have to say the impact on the families that have been involved is absolutely tremendous. And I've looked at several case studies, and the disruption that is caused to their lives, not only of the vulnerable person, but of the families, the carers, the broader social interaction that they're involved with is immense. And I don't think we should all lose sight of that. So, you know, it isn't unfair criticism of officers and their efforts. I think we need to see the much bigger picture. And the last point I'd like to make is, given the protracted nature of this issue, what alternatives have been considered? What different methods of supporting families and vulnerable people has been looked at? We can't just cut and leave people to their own devices. You know, sometimes 180 hours per week with, you know, stuck at home. There is an opportunity, and I accept that the COVID restrictions are on us all, but there is an opportunity to have looked at different options and different ways of supporting people. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Yeah, I've got a constituent in my area that was having 5 days a week and now has nothing. So I can appreciate what the carers are going through. Okay, I think who's next on my list? Michelle?
Hi there, thank you. It's just a small word of warning, really, and it's to back up Councillor Cook's comments about the COVID and returning too quickly. As you all know, the Parent Network runs groups in the community. We're a community-based organisation. We've got 25 groups before COVID that we're actively meeting on a weekly basis across the borough. In order for us to get back to that situation, we have had to go through producing risk assessments, and they're very robust. But we have found that due to the infection rate at the moment in the borough, and it is, even though we're going through the proper risk assessments, it is impossible to run every week. So what we've had to do is to run our groups fortnightly, so that if we do get a COVID outbreak, we are able to contain it. And if all of our staff are down, at least we've moved to online for the second week. So just wanted to put that little bit of a word of warning in there that, it may feel as though we want to get everything back, but there is a caveat to that. And actually with the cases rising in Caerphilly, is something we need to be very mindful of. I hope that helps. I didn't want it to be, just sort of in there as a little bit of information from outside, if you like.
Thanks, Michelle. Okay, Councillor Bishop. And then
just,
we'll have Councillor Etheridge, and then I think we might need to start drawing things to a close then.
just a few points. Number one, to address the service users who've been using the services. A lot of them are very much habit-based, and they like routine. The routines have been completely broken. Obviously, this has had a massive impact on their mental health as well as their physical health. Then you've also got the instance of integrated living, where some families and some service users would like to be more integrated into the communities. There's others who don't. So that's another issue that needs to be brought in. But then you've got people who are in assisted living who haven't had one point being made towards them either. Service users are not being considered. And again, I think this goes back to asking for consultation periods where more service users are being considered, as well as families and carers. Okay, my second point, COVID. Wouldn't service users be better prepared within the day centres than they are out in the communities, cafes, theatres, out and about? Surely if COVID cases are rising, this is also an issue.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Councillor Bishop. Councillor Etheridge?
Yeah, just a number of points. The first point was the independent person. The second point, obviously, they would be independent and they would report to us. This is what scrutiny is all about, actually scrutinising the independence report. If you look at my wording of the amended motion, I quite clearly didn't mention anything about sort of political. And now Councillor Cook have mentioned the words political football, and he's mentioned the words, I would, please do not vote for Councillor Mann's motion. I think, we need to move forward here. We need to be helpful, and we need to put the carers and the users first. So in order to move forward and try and be productive, I would like to ask Councillor Mann if he would take all the wording of my motion to subtract his. Otherwise, we're going to be talking around this, and I just want to move forward for all users and carers. So finally, I'd just like to ask Councillor Mann, and you've all got the email which I sent out, if he would be happy with that wording, as would Councillor Cook, in order for us to move forward. Otherwise, Chair, you're going to have people voting for, abstaining, against, and it does the users and carers and Caerphilly Council no good. We all got to show that we work together here for the best of the communities. Thank you.
Councillor Mann, would you like to respond?
Well, I've not heard anyone commenting on Councillor Etheridge's amendment as yet, Chair. I responded to the director because I thought it was fair to do so. I have tried not to make this political. It's a shame that Councillor Cook mentioned party political in his contribution, but there we are. I don't see why the two things couldn't be joined, Chair.
Right. Well, as chair, I'm agreeing actually with that because I can't see that there's any substantive changes apart from one or two things which we said regarding the officers and also adding regarding the working group into the actual motion. I totally agree with you. We didn't want this particular scrutiny committee to be political, but there have been comments about political issues on this. It must be an election year next year, and I don't want to see that continue in the future. Thank you very much. No political comments. So Kath, can we go back to the first substantive motion, please, which was suggested right at the beginning of the conversation?
Thank you, Chair. We have the original motion proposed by Councillor Mann, and we have an amendment from Councillor Etheridge. So shall I take up to see whether members are happy to take the amendment from Councillor Etheridge in the first instance, and do you want me to read it out?
This is the combination of the two motions, isn't it?
Yeah, if I read out the amended motion, which would be removing the sentence that Councillor Mann agreed to be removed, and the addition from Councillor Kevin. Excuse me a minute, it's going to take a bit of time to read this out.
Okay, no worries.
In view of the significant public concern about suggested changes to the Council's day care services, the Plaid Cymru Group calls on the Council to return to providing a full service of hours at day centres, pending an extensive review. We also call on CCBC not to withdraw previous transport arrangements for service users. The proposals as they stand have caused immense distress and anxiety for carers and some of the most vulnerable members of our society, which is having a detrimental effect on their mental health and well-being. We are concerned that the existing consultation exercise has not gone out to all carers and those vulnerable individuals they care for. I've deleted the next bit. So we go on then to a better system of communication with service users and families is badly needed so that they are a proper part of the decision-making process. In the meantime, there should be a moratorium on any changes taking place for at least 12 months, with the final decision on any changes being considered by the full council. And then added into that is, in view of the recent concerns raised by users and carers at a public meeting and a petition of over 1,000 names, and the worry, distress, anxiety, upset and stress caused for many in our communities, we are pleased that the authorities have recognised that the original consultation exercise was withdrawn and a more robust exercise will be undertaken by an independent person with all stakeholders, users, carers and families. We therefore call for all parties to work together, and in order to work in partnership, a working group is set up with specific terms of reference to monitor and evaluate progress to ensure fairness and consistency. The group would therefore be chaired by the Cabinet member, councillors from the Scrutiny Committee, limited numbers 2 to 3, carers and users, officers from social services and union representative. A report will be produced as recommendations for evaluation and consideration with options going forward, ensuring regular engagement with all parties. That's it, Chair.
Well,
so somebody would
Thank you,
Somebody would need to move and second that amended motion, Chair.
Okay, then can we have a proposer? Any proposal and seconder?
I'll move it, Chair.
Yeah, I'll second it, Councillor Skivins.
Okay, then. Right. No one will vote via forms.
I'll take it on a roll call, Chair, because to make it easier for everybody.
Okay.
If you like. The members, when I call your name, can you please indicate whether you're for the amended motion or against the amended motion?
Thank you.
Councillor Bazina.
Against.
Councillor Bishop.
For.
Councillor Cushion.
For.
Councillor Etheridge.
I've got concerns. I've got really concerns, but I'm going to vote for.
Councillor Evans.
Against.
Councillor Gay.
Against.
Councillor Gale.
Your mic's off, June.
Councillor Gale.
Hang on.
Against. Okay. Councillor James.
Against.
Councillor Jeremiah.
Against.
Skivens.
For.
Thomas.
Against.
Williams.
Against.
Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3. That's failed, Chair. That's the amended motion has failed.
Jesus
okay then. Well, that's actually not surprising. Right, I think then we can go for notice of motion to the second amendment, which is in its entirety, apart from the withdrawal of the second paragraph of the second sentence of the fourth paragraph. Can we have a proposer and a seconder, please?
Propose, Councillor Skivens.
I'll second, Councillor Bishop.
Okay.
I'll take a roll call again, Chair.
On a point of order, Chair, surely the original motion now should be put.
That's what we're doing, Chair.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah,
just
without the paragraph taken out from Councillor Mann.
That was a second amendment, Chair. So we can take that as a second amendment. If it fails with the second amendment, then we take the original notice of motion, Councillor Etheridge.
Yes, so just the point of order is the original motion which Councillor Mann put down. This is what we are voting on. Is that correct?
No, the second amendment.
The second amendment was that we remove the one sentence, Councillor Etheridge. So we'll take a vote on whether the second amendment, which is to remove that sentence, is successful. If that fails, then we would go back to the original motion as per the report.
Okay, thank you.
So we are voting on Councillor Mann's motion with the exclusion of the sentence as Councillor Mann agreed. So Councillor Bezina.
Against.
Councillor Bishop.
For.
Councillor Cushion.
For.
Councillor Etheridge.
For.
Councillor Evans.
Against.
Councillor Gow.
Against.
Councillor Gale.
Against.
Councillor James.
Against.
Councillor Jeremiah.
Against.
Councillor Gale, sorry. Councillor Gale.
Against.
Councillor James. Sorry, did I have your vote?
Yes, it was against.
Councillor Jeremiah.
Against.
Councillor Skivens.
For.
Councillor Thomas.
Against.
Williams.
Against.
That's failed, Chair. So now we need to go to the original motion.
And I think we know where that's going as well, don't we? Okay, can I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Proposer for the original motion, which includes the bit about staffing. Second sentence, fourth paragraph. Any proposer? Could we fail otherwise without a proposer and a seconder?
That's failed, Chair, if nobody's proposing it.
No worries. Okay, so in light of that, then the actual motion has failed. Bear with me a second. I need to move this mouse around. So I think we move on now to the next item now, don't we, Kath?
That's correct, Chair.
Yeah, okay then. As discussed at the beginning of the meeting, we will now go on to discuss item 10 on the agenda, which is the Social Services COVID-19 position statement, please. And I'd like to ask Councillor Cook to take this forward, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The Social Services COVID-19 position statement provides an update to members of the key issues faced by the service and demonstrates the creative and flexible way the services have been able to respond to the challenges and changing guidance. Members know that social services is a key frontline service that has remained operational throughout the pandemic with appropriate risk assessment and risk management process in place. The continued impact on all services cannot be underestimated, and this is particularly acute in adult services. Given the experiences and learned to date, I'm confident that social services are able to respond quickly and proportionately to any required changes going forward. Before handing over to officers, I would like to put on record my thanks to the whole social care workforce for the continued hard work, dedication and resilience during these unprecedented times. I'm pleased to hand over to Dave Street, Acting Chief Executive. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Street.
Thank you, Chair. Just an opening paragraph from me, if I may, before I pass you on to Gareth and Joe, who will do this topic far more justice than I. We felt it was very important. Clearly, there's been a lot of discussion around day services tonight, and in the couple of months leading up to this meeting. We thought it was really important that you understood the sort of challenges the Directorate not only has faced in the last 18 months, but continues to face moving forward. We are unprecedented levels of demand and complexity. We have workforce pressures likes of which I've never seen in my years in social care. And we are being pulled from pillar to post, quite frankly. Gareth will take you through some of the children's services pressures that we're facing. Joe will take you through some of the adult services that will incorporate these services, but at a much broader. We thought it was really important that as a scrutiny committee, you really understand where we're at the moment, which is in very uncharted and choppy waters. As I said, life has never been this tricky in delivering in social care in Caerphilly before. And I think you're going to be quite taken aback at some of the challenges that we face at the moment. So with no further ado, I'll pass you on to Gareth and to Joe.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Street. Mr. Jenkins?
Yep, thanks, Dave. There'll be some recurring messages, I think, will emerge throughout this evening's conversations, really, particularly in terms of the challenges that we're facing, in terms of managing demand, safeguarding those people that are in greatest need, and responding to the changing restrictions and all the guidance that goes with that. And that's all within a context which I think will be familiar to members in terms of challenges that we've got in terms of recruitment and retention of key staff to deliver the services to. For children's services specifically, we've been able to maintain a high level of service provision throughout the pandemic through the use of a blended and hybrid. These are the new terms that we're all beginning to use, aren't they? Approach to the way that we deliver that. So we've got triage arrangements that are in place that continue to be employed to assess risk and manage the risk in all the activities that we undertake to keep families safe and protect our staff. I think from 5.8 on page 61 of the pack, the report states that overall referral rates have remained steady throughout the pandemic, but the numbers of those referrals that progressed to assessment dropped by 10.5% during the period of COVID. And of those assessments, there was a further drop of the numbers of those that progressed to preventative services. So by that, I mean services that are non-statutory, and those reduced by 41%. And that's in the report. Now, that in itself, you may think is a concern, but of some reassurance really is that, and this is in 5.10 of the report, it confirms that the numbers of children that are on the Child Protection Register, so those children that we would consider to be in the greatest need and the most vulnerable, those numbers have remained stable throughout the period. So that evidences to us that the children in that greatest need have continued to receive the support that they need. Court proceedings during this period have dropped steadily, but that is in line with a UK-wide review of family justice system. So we are quite pleased about that. That's going in the right direction. I think 5.13 is important to note, because we are, within that context, we're seeing a huge shift in complexity across all the work. So we've got increased cases of chronic neglect and poor parenting that we think may be linked to the lack of routine professional contact with families, particularly through health and education. So there were periods of time, particularly in the first lockdown, where those normal surveillance arrangements that you would expect to see, where people are having contact with professionals, that stopped. And I think we're seeing the impact of that now further down the line. And I think of particular concern is the increase in the number of young people that we're seeing presenting with very severe mental health crises. So young people that we've not had previous involvement with, who attend hospital, are actually admitted because of the way they're presenting, and then of course we have to then find services and placements for those children. And as I say, very often we've not had any previous involvement, so that's a real change for us, and that directly links, and I know health board colleagues are doing a lot of work on this, that directly links to impact of COVID on self-confidence, self-esteem and relationships and everything that goes with that. As Councillor Cook said, you know that social services has continued to operate throughout the pandemic, and although our offices are not open to the public per se, we are having office attendances, we're managing those attendances, there are certain things that we have to do in person, and we're managing that in the best possible way. The obvious things around family time, which is the supervised contact for children with their parents when they're in care. We've had to maintain that. When the weather's good, we can do some of that outdoors, but of course, when the weather's bad, we have to use the offices. So it's just to let members know that we are doing that. So overall, the complexity of cases that we're working with has increased. Our placement pressures have continued to grow, creating additional budgetary pressure, and all of that is in the context of challenges around recruitment and retention of staff. I don't know whether, Claire, it would be helpful for me to just stop to answer any questions specifically on children's there, or whether you want to carry on directly with Joe and save the questions to the end. That's entirely for you and committee to determine.
All right. Sorry, somebody else say something then? No, I personally have got one or two questions for you, Gareth, and I think it's good that actually we can actually break that down into children and then adult services, if you don't mind. Before that, difficulty we got here though, because I think we've also got a speaker coming in as well, who wants to. You might be just want to ask questions, but are members okay if we break it down into children and adult services? Yeah, yeah, lovely. Okay, I don't know if anybody else has any questions, but I've got a question on 5.6. Children's service teams have employed a blended hybrid approach to the delivery of services throughout the pandemic. What sort of examples have you got of that blended approach?
I think what I'm referring to there really is that we've employed a range of different ways of contacting families and maintaining contact with families. So that has included, obviously, the obvious one is over the telephone to make contact initially. Some of it we'll be doing on FaceTime, ensuring that we're maintaining contact in that way. And of course, where we need to, then we have continued to do face-to-face, in-person visits. But as I said, triage arrangements are critical there. So we plan those ahead. We make sure that nobody in the household has COVID or COVID symptoms. We employ the use of PPE if we need to, wherever that's needed, social distancing, obviously, and the hygiene that goes with it. So the key for us is about how we plan those visits ahead so that we can ensure that family members that need to be seen are kind of kept to a minimum, if you like, so that we're trying to avoid any risks of infection. Where we can do that, we also do that outdoors. So it's having that range of ways of working, and all of this is set within the context of what the priority and what the risk is. So if we need to see a child, we'll see a child. There's absolutely no question about it.
So pre-pandemic, it used to be always face-to-face, well, majority of time face-to-face, but now sort of during the pandemic, because we're still in the pandemic, whichever way we look at it, we're still in the pandemic. You have to implement a number of other ways then, approaching families.
Absolutely, and we try to be as flexible and as creative as we can be. But as I say, it's all predicated on what the risk is. So if we're really concerned, then we're going to do, it's going to be business as normal, isn't it, for us? And we will make sure that we see the family, we make sure that we see the child.
Okay, thanks, Gareth. And the other question I actually have is on 5.11, where you said applications to courts to protect children were already reduced and have continued to reduce since 2020. Might that have been all to do with COVID? Because I know when, as you all know, I lost my partner 2 years ago, the original coroner's inquest was suspended from March 2020 because obviously we're in the middle of a pandemic, and it didn't go ahead until March 2021. So might that be the reason why the court numbers have gone down, or is it, you know, because it's overall things are going down now for the more serious cases?
It's very much the direction of travel that we're on. We're doing other things. We're using all of our support services in a more creative way. We were very driven by judges' attitudes about care planning and care proceedings, and that overinflated the number of proceedings that we were taking because there was case law that was telling us that we had to do this. So we've been through the UK-wide review of that family justice system. We've embarked on a journey of actually reducing that and managing more risk within families and managing more risk within the community, using the Child Protection Register more creatively. Now, in terms of court proceedings, for care proceedings, so within the family courts, there has been no disruption apart from the fact that face-to-face hearings stopped during the initial lockdown. And in the same way as we've just described how we're approaching it within children's services, the courts now have what they call a hybrid approach. So for key hearings, they bring people together, but for other hearings, they're doing them remotely using Teams and other methods. So it's very much a blended approach. So I think you'll have heard me say before, we probably had maybe 2 or 3 weeks when that first lockdown hit, where there was some disruption to service, but we very quickly responded to that and got back on track with what we needed to do, what those essential elements of those services were, and how we deliver that. So from a family justice point of view, apart from the fact that we've changed the way we're doing it, there hasn't been a delay. Okay, lovely, thanks. I think we've got a couple of questions from other members now. Councillor Bishop?
Hi, just a couple actually. I did notice that you're experiencing obviously issues with staffing, care staff, but also with social work staff. How can you anticipate with the growing needs coming up because of COVID with mental health? Do you anticipate these will increase your numbers of risks with parents? And how will you going to manage that with the lack of staff?
There's an awful lot wrapped up in that, isn't there? I think you'll know from children's services perspective that we've had particular challenges recruiting social workers into what we call our locality teams, which are the teams that deal with the assessments and the court proceedings and the child protection cases. And as you will also be aware, we've had to implement a market supplement in order to attract staff because our pay scales in Caerphilly are lower than our neighbouring authorities. So that is an added challenge that at some point we're going to need to face, aren't we? In terms of overall workload, what I've tried to describe and what I referred to earlier is that there's been a bit of a drop in certain areas, but what has made up for that is the complexity. So I certainly feel confident as head of children's services that we're in a position where we can respond to that increase in complexity, because overall there's been a slight decrease in the amount of work that's progressing through that. So at this stage we're fairly confident, but of course any team that's carrying social work vacancies is going to be under more pressure, isn't it? So we're monitoring that very, very closely and carefully.
Yeah, my concerns, there's two mental health concerns really. It's the mental health concern for your staff, the complexity of their work, the short staff, and the additional pressures there. But then you've also got the issues where mental health concern for carers and parents and fosterers are all increasing with the staffing changes, maybe, because obviously you are short of staff. Then you've also got to take into account isolation periods.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, really important points. I think in terms of, if I deal with the first one first, which is around staff, you may have heard us say that during previous updates around COVID that we have a very flexible approach to supporting our staff. So some staff need to be in the office more frequently because of their emotional health and well-being. Whereas other staff are able to manage that. We've got full access to Care First, and managers are continuing to supervise their staff and give them professional support. None of that has changed because of the pandemic. So in that sense, where we feel that there's a need, then we're in a good position to be able to address that and support a member of staff. So, you know, not many staff, but we've got some staff who are in every single day because of that very issue. In terms of families, I think it's amazing how resilient we've all been really as a society in terms of responding to the pandemic and the implications that's had. That's not to say that the longer term implications are not going to be quite significant over time, but at this point, you know, we are doing our very best. Where there's an identified need, then we look to what support can be provided. And you're right, you know, in the early stage, in the very first lockdown, we had a number of foster carers who were really struggling with the restrictions, and trying to encourage children to stay in was very difficult, particularly with teenagers. And we had a few wobbles around that time, but actually with the support that the fostering team were able to provide, people started to manage that in a different way, and the approach was different. And of course, if as a local authority we can give the foster carers support to make those difficult choices sometimes, then they feel more confident about being able to put some parameters down and some boundaries down. But it's a moving feast, isn't it? And I think over time we're going to learn so much more, aren't we, about the overall impact that this is having on people in the longer term. Is that helpful?
Thank you.
Okay, Michelle?
Thanks very much. It's more of an observation really than a question, I suppose. But we're all, I'm sure that everybody is aware of all the hard work that's been going on to support the families, particularly with the children who have been on the register and potentially to come onto the register. But I think 5.13 is quite significant, because what we've found is that a lot of the families that have been struggling during lockdown, the parents are carrying ACEs, are carrying adverse childhood experiences of their own. And what lockdown has done is taken away their support structure. So a lot of the organisations funded by Families First and Flying Start were unable to continue to give that ongoing support and almost keep a level keel for those families. And I think this is showing that I'm not wanting to steal anything away from anyone else, but it also shows that early intervention, which is probably the bit that has got lost in that one, is the thing that's created this uprising of number of families that were previously not known. And we've got a funding opportunity, I think, around ACEs to look at how we support. A lot of effort goes into supporting the children and making sure that the children are supported if they experience adverse childhood experiences. But we don't do a lot of work around supporting the parents who already have that and are carrying it. And it is almost invisible until something like lockdown, where all of a sudden it reveals itself, and then it shows that there are chronic, as you said, chronic parental neglect cases being reported. So I think that's something maybe to put on the to-do list in a way, and to maybe bring up when things start to unroll a little bit more.
Thank you. To be fair, I'm glad that wasn't a difficult question. You normally ask me difficult questions, so thank you for that.
I was on my best behaviour.
Right, I'd just like to actually ask, I know Mr. Rothbottom is here to be a guest speaker. Would you like to add anything here, Mr. Rothbottom, or would you like to continue with the full report with adult services and then add what you would like to add at the end?
Yes, I think I would like to add at the end, if you don't mind.
That's okay. You're welcome to. Right then. Is there anything else, Gareth, you'd like to highlight within the children's section of the report?
No, thank you. I'll just hand over to Joe.
Okay then. Hi, Joe.
Evening, members. Thank you for that. As Gareth said, there will be some sort of recurring themes in here, because I think it is important to stress that we have done robust risk assessments for everything that we do for all the services throughout. And as Gareth has alluded to, safeguarding has been the top priority. I mean, as you're aware, adult safeguarding is actually managed within children's services. All safeguarding sits there, which is why there's little reference in the adult side. I mean, it is very timely because, as has already been mentioned earlier, our numbers are increasing significantly. The Health Board told me today they've had more admissions over the weekend for people who are positive with COVID than they've had. The numbers are going up. So, as Mrs. Street has already said, this time last year, I thought it couldn't get any worse. Honestly, I thought it can't be as bad as it was when we were in the height of the pandemic. But at the moment, it is as bad because the challenges we are facing, particularly around staffing, are really impacting on us significantly. So I'll take you through a few key parts of the report, and I'm able to update because quite a lot often changes in a short space of time. So if you looked at the OT waiting list, which is 5.18, they've actually seen an increase of 57% of referrals, and that's continued for a couple of months now. So they're having to prioritise their work as normal. They are managing to do all the really high level ones, but the non-priority waiting list had gone to 16 weeks. It's actually now at 18 weeks. But I do have some good news. We have really struggled to recruit to occupational therapists. We've been out twice to advert and got nothing. This time on the third attempt, we actually had 2 very good candidates. So despite only having 1 vacancy, we have appointed both OTs with a view to funding one from the Social Care Recovery Grants. And we've got 2 OTs returning from maternity leave in January. So we're hopeful in the new year we will be in a much better position in terms of that. So there is some sort of hope. As Gareth said, we've had the same implications with the impact on individuals' mental health, and that's been borne out in the figures that are in 5.20 and 5.21. That's important to stress that those figures represent the social workers that we have based in the police control rooms. So those are social workers who are approved mental health practitioners, and they're giving the officers the advice. So we know that there's a big impact there. As a result of that, to ensure that we can retain and recruit more of those staff, we've applied the market supplement to EDT, our emergency duty out of hours, because a lot of those assessments come in out of hours. So as a positive, that's been agreed this week. I think it would be really fair to say that the relationship with the Health Board at the present time is a real challenge. That's impacted particularly on the community resource teams and the frailty teams. You know, members will recall many presentations on that services. They're there to help people remain at home, prevent unnecessary hospital admissions, or to try to turn people around at the front door when they're in the medical assessment unit, elderly frail unit, etc. Now, again, they're having a huge increase in referrals and the same staffing difficulties because there's doctors, nurses, therapists and support workers, all of whom we're struggling to recruit. But we are looking at that regionally. We've developed several action plans. And one thing we're particularly looking at with the Health Board is location and role of therapists. Would they be better placed more in the community than in the hospitals? 5.25, we talk about the impact of the Welsh Government guidance that we received. In there, I gave you an illustration of the fact that we get out guidance that comes out to the public, which says like we're in level 0. If you've been doubly vaccinated, you don't have to self-isolate. But the guidance to health and social care was very different. So our staff, if they were a household contact, despite being doubly vaccinated and some having had their boosters, they had to refrain from work for 10 days. They could live their lives, but they couldn't come to work. So as an example, in 1 week in Hart, in domiciliary care, we had to cover 20 shifts like that. Now those results come in at all times of the day and night, because people often get notified, particularly if it's a child, that the positive test comes through at the night. That person can be in work the following morning, or people can be in work when the results come through and they have to go home. On the positive, that guidance has now been updated. Those staff can now go to work as long as they have a negative PCR result, and they will do daily lateral flow tests for up to 10 days. However, they can't work with anybody that's deemed to be clinically vulnerable. So we've taken that to mean that anybody who was previously shielding, so they can't work with any of those. So often we have to change rotas, etc. But I think that's one of the things that often when it comes out as guidance from Welsh Government, it doesn't have that bit attached to it saying, and there'll be separate, more detailed guidance for health and social care, because everybody says, we're in level 0, we can do this, whereas health and social care can't do a fair few things. So that has been a real challenge for us and continues to be so. And you can see when we have staff who test positive, like in residential homes, there's examples in there of the number of catering shifts and things that we've had to cover, and that is a real challenge for us because there's not a lot of cooks about. In terms of domiciliary care, I have actually got an update on that position, which initially seems a little more positive. We currently have 6 people in hospital waiting discharge for a package of care, and 6 people who are being discharged this week. That's 106.5 hours. We've got 62 people in the community waiting for 266 hours, and 4 people with a package to start this week. So overall, we're short of 412 hours a week. Now, whilst that was a positive position, I've been notified this afternoon by one of our providers in the independent sector, there are 23 cases where they feel they are unlikely to be able to continue to provide because they have lost a significant number of staff who've handed in their notices this week. So whereas sometimes you make a gain in one area, that really shows how fragile the market is in terms of that. In terms of the care homes, those figures have changed as well. We've currently now got 11 care homes that are in incident. There are 52 staff and 33 residents that have tested positive. And there are also 3 homes which are under review because they've got a single positive staff member at the present. So obviously that has a significant impact for us in terms of being able to try to place people from either the community or hospital when homes are in incidents and they've got restrictions on them. Day services has obviously been discussed a lot during the motion, and I think it's really important to say we really do recognise that the impact of the day services not being provided at the level they were is having on unpaid carers. And I think, you know, we know that, we've seen it in the response to the consultations, we've seen it in the petitions, and we've seen it now in the notions of motion. But I think the important thing for me to expand on the discussions earlier is about learning from those 2 other local authorities who have actually engaged an independent organisation to undertake that work on their behalf, because then that work is truly independent, it's much wider ranging. So they consulted with individuals, as several members of the committee have alluded to, and actually they try to do that much more on a face-to-face, even if it's small groups. Obviously some people can do online, etc. With the carers, with the third sector, with independent organisations, with assessment care management, with other provider services, and they've co-produced a day service model for going forward. And I think really that is the best option to go with, and I think it's important it's a whole organisation, so it probably would be done by several people at the time. I have alluded a lot to the staffing challenges that we've had to endure or still going through in terms of covering the domiciliary care hours. This is the first time in the 20 years I've worked for Caerphilly that I've known our residential care homes have to use agency staff. We've never had to use agency staff before. We're actually doing everything we can to try to recruit more staff. We've got open adverts. We are currently going through the apprenticeship scheme to try to start people through that route, the Kickstart scheme to get people back into employment. We're working with Social Care Wales, who some of you might have seen the adverts that are on the television, the big social media campaign to try to get people into care services and professionals as well, social workers, OTs, etc. On the positive, they have worked with local authorities and acknowledged the fact that they're delaying registration for residential care workers for a year and reducing the current demands on the hours that staff have to evidence for their continual professional development to maintain their registration. So for domiciliary care workers, that was 90 hours. They've agreed to cut that down to 30, given the impact that the pandemic had on training and things. But I can't underestimate for you the challenges in that. I mean, you know, I often quote this now, we're competing with the retail sector. We're offering things like £14.90 an hour, plus incentives and golden hellos and that sort of thing. And we aren't competing with that. You will see around the borough, we've had a load of banners made to actually say we're recruiting. We're trying to get all our staff to encourage anybody to recruit, and we're using much more social media, etc. And we're going to be working with our HR department to try to streamline the recruitment process, because even when we get staff in, it takes us such a long time to get them in and inducted. So we need to move on the whole recruitment process, really. So I will pause there for many questions, I'm sure.
I tell you now, Joe, it is a carers market out there, because I know of a number of carers actually now moved from one job to the other because there's better terms. You know, they're getting better rates, better terms and everything. And it is a carers market out there. Brexit have got a lot to answer for, I think, on times. I do have more clarification, I think, than questions on the report. 5.31, when you say incident status, and you said about the how many residential homes there were, I can't remember, 7 large independent care homes, does that mean that there's COVID in that care home?
Yes, it does.
Right, I thought you said something about that. And also some clarification or a question, if you like, if want, really, regarding day services, 5.36. Why are some of this, well, from the look of it, the centres, they'd only open part-time?
Yeah, attendance at the centres was prioritised by the social workers, and the attendance is for people who couldn't have their needs met in the community. So people who've got complex care usually need access to specialist equipment to be able to have their personal care needs met. So they've been prioritised that way. The numbers that attend each basis are subsequently as a result of a health and safety risk assessment that was done by Health and Safety and has been reviewed as the guidance changes as to how many people can be safely accommodated in that setting. And as we've said before, there is the staffing issue as well. We are at least 20 staff down within day services.
So is that's why they're only open part-time then?
Well, no, at the moment they're open part-time because that's what we can manage with the increasing staffing levels that we're giving to people while they're there, because they all need more support for personal care, etc. And that they are the ones that have been prioritised. What we're saying is when social workers will identify people need more sessions, some of those people need sessions in the community, some need sessions in the bases. But also one of the things we've tried to do is that people have a session within their local community. So even if you go to a base, you go to the base within your community, because as you said yourself earlier, sometimes people will then go out from the base. What was happening a lot before was that people were travelling significant distances. So now we're trying to say, if you live in Caerphilly, it's easier to go to Ystradmannet than it was to go to Brooklands. So we're looking at where people live in terms of where they go for their session.
Right, but yeah, I think what I'm asking is, if the centres were open full-time rather than part-time, then you'd be able to offer more sessions. That's what I'm trying to get at.
I can see what you're trying to get at, and that's what we'll be looking at, as if we can increase capacity, is it in those bases, because that's what those people need. The other issue is, if, let's hope this doesn't happen, anything happens, as Mark Draper was saying, if numbers don't improve in the next 3 weeks and we go to different alert levels, what we know is community sessions can carry on even if there is another local or national lockdown. The base sessions last time, we had to stop those altogether because that was, people couldn't go into the bases, was the guidance then.
Okay then. Now, can I don't mean to be ignorant to our fellow members that's got questions to ask. I'd just like to ask Mr. Rosebottom whether or not he would like to comment now, or would you like to wait until after everybody's asked their questions?
No, if I could make my comments now, that would be more appropriate for myself.
Okay, then, Mr. Rosebottom, you go ahead.
Right, good evening, everybody. My name is Mark Rosebottom. The group of carers and service users I represent tonight number more than 200 people. It's already been touched on with regards to the importance for day services. I'll use myself as an example, but my example is indicative of dozens and dozens of other carers and service users. For my son to attend a day centre, it doesn't just meet his needs, it meets my needs to continue with my full-time employment. I've worked virtually all my working life. If day services were suddenly stopped, I would seriously question the fact that I would probably have to give up my employment, which itself has a bearing on the economy and the social economy side of things. I would then be forced to claim benefits. That's of no use to anybody. It contributes nothing to society and nothing to the economy as such. And as I said, that's indicative of a lot of carers. Day centres don't just provide the needs for the individual. It allows carers to pursue, if they wish, some sort of career. I've spoken to many carers that have had to put off attaining further education courses because they wanted to pursue a career. So day services is not just about the individual that attends our day service. It's about the carers and their families able to pursue a typical life beyond caring. Virtually every carer that I've spoken to has come up with the same analogy. It seems as though they're on a train that's on a circular track in a tunnel. There are no stations to get on or off. There is no light at the end of that tunnel. It's just a complete railroad that's taking place morning, noon and night for 168 hours of every week, of every month, of every year. The community support that is currently being offered, I've touched on this before with meetings I've had with the likes of Dave Street. And for a lot of the people I represent, gardening will never ever be available to my son. Walking will never be available for my son. Doing crafts will never be available for my son. Going to work will never be available for my son. Carrying out exercises and sport will never be available to my son. Going shopping will never be available to my son. Singing and taking part in music sessions will never be applicable to my son. And that is indicative of a large number of people that I am here tonight representing. Some of the frequently asked questions that are on the council's website. The one says that there's no statutory duty for daycare, but yet the local authority has a statutory duty to meet the needs in law of individuals. Now, it's going to be remiss of me if I don't quote some of the
You've gone on mute, Mr. Rothbottom.
Apologies. Did you all hear my explanation of some of the community support that's currently out there? Yeah, thanks. The other subject I was touching on with regards to frequently asked questions, where the council states there's no statutory duty for daycare, but yet the local authority has a statutory duty to meet the needs, not just of the individual, but of the carers as well. Now, my son's assessment, which was carried out by the local authority, and I'll just read one line from it, and I will name my son as I have no objection to his name being named. For Mikey to continue to receive a 5-day service at Brooklands Resource Base. That is a fundamental need for my son and many of the other carers I represent. My son will never move on in his care. He will always need the care he's received 10 years ago, 5 years ago, today, tomorrow, the next 5 years, and the next 10 years. So moving on for my son and many others is not an option. It might be for some, but for the group I represent, it is not an option. I would like to point out, in pursuance of the Social Services and Wellbeing Act of 2014, namely section 34.2, the following are examples of what may be provided or arranged to meet the needs under sections 35 to 45. Bullet point A states, and I quote, accommodation in a care home, children's homes, or premises of some other type. I would argue that day centres would be classed as a premise of some other type. These are why it is fundamentally and critical that day centre services are kept in their current format for those who require them, as laid out in the needs assessment that have been carried out by numerous social workers that actually attend and liaise with the families and help us to reach the recommendations. I have had a meeting with Mr. Street, as many of you are aware. I asked Mr. Street then about increasing the capacity at day centres. And one of the things that was raised was lateral flow tests, but it was also raised the risks versus the benefits. Well, the benefits to day centre services for my son, for my wife, and for me far outweigh the risks of taking a lateral flow test. Much the same as we've heard about the vaccine. The benefits far outweigh the risks. That's why each and every one of us that are able to have the vaccine have had the vaccine. Now,
if I can take my son.
Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Rosebottom. If you could just sort of wrap things up now, because I think we've gone past our 5 minutes. I do appreciate that.
Okay. Well, if I can take my son to a local authority-run library or leisure centre without any control measures being put in place, it seems rather hypocritical that he can't attend a day centre when we are more than capable of putting risk mitigation in place. Again, I'd like to take the opportunity of thanking everybody for allowing me to speak on behalf of the carers and service users that I am here tonight to represent.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Rosebottom. I think you've actually come across very, very eloquent in what you've actually said. And it's truly appreciated because it gives an insight to you as a carer and to those you represent about the real needs, really, what is required out there. And it is appreciated. I really mean that. I don't know if anybody would like to say anything to Mr. Rosebottom on this on his speech. I really appreciate it. If somebody'd like to say something. Kevin, have you got anything to say, or is it a question?
Yeah, I'd like to thank Mr. Rosebottom because we're all everyone here is supportive of Mr. Rosebottom, and I would just like to thank him for his constructive debate on behalf of the committee. But I've got a number of questions, Chair, on the report.
That's okay, Kevin. Yeah, once again, Mr. Rosebottom, I really appreciate it, and hopefully we'll see you at some time then when we've finished the actual consultation.
Yep, thank you very much. I will be leaving the meeting now.
Sorry?
I will be leaving the meeting now.
Oh, well, thank you very much for attending. It truly is appreciated.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, then, Kevin, if you'd like to ask Joe.
Okay, Joe, I've got a number of points. I won't go through them all because this is why I didn't want to hog the meeting. I've sent you all an email listing all the points, and I don't expect you to answer all them. But just a number of concerns. Obviously, the first concern is the statement by David, because David, Mr. Street have said that in 2.4, we are confident that social services will be able to respond quickly and proportionately to any changes that need to be put into operation. And I said it in the email, and that's a very bold statement for Mr. Street to make. I'm sure he'll come back to me, because my worry here is about the pressure on all the staff. The other concerns I had was about a robust risk assessment being in place, about prioritisation of work, and the OT, the significant backlogs they've got. I've also got concerns, and would you agree, Joe, that the Domiciliary Care, seems to be in sort of crisis, reading the actual report, and I'm quite worried about that. In regard the final point, the actual day services, whilst I think it's a good idea about this independent person, have we any idea of a time scale here? When they are going to be appointed? Is it going to be, it says in the report, I think it mentions a considerable time, and I think we need an end date here. If they're going to be employed in, say, December, will they be finished by February or March? Because these are questions which the users have asked me. And finally, the final point is lateral flow tests. Will these be undertaken for people? If we can open more of the day centres. But I would like your views on an action plan and the other matters. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'll take the domiciliary care one first because I wrote that one down. I think, Kevin, it is a national crisis. I mean, as I said to you, at one point I thought our position had improved slightly, but you know, another agency coming back today with 23 calls they potentially won't be able to cover. It's just over 3,500 across the region, the health board footprint that we are short of a week. That was up at 6,000, so it has come down a bit, but there's no consistency. And I have to say, I think one of the reasons we're bringing it down, if I'm honest, is we're working with the providers and we're being clear to them, tell us how long it actually takes for you to do the real basic personal care. Because if we can cut calls down, we can fit more people in. Because we've got some people here who've got nothing. And we are talking, you know, basic, getting up, getting dressed, getting washed, help to feed, help to use the toilet and things like that. So, you know, we could be facing very difficult decisions in the future if those things don't change in terms of, you know, where we need our staff to be or any placements we would have to make. You know, I think we are discussing it constantly. It's discussions with Welsh Government, with Social Care Wales, with the regulators in terms of what can be done. We're trying to do stuff locally with the colleges and the universities to get people in. You know, we're going to have to look at what we can do to make it an attractive career. So one of the things I want to do is a lot of our staff, when we get them, we tend to retain them. When staff go with us, it tends to be retirements or promotional things. Well, why do they stay? We need people telling people why it is a good job, why it is rewarding if it isn't financially rewarding. So there's a lot of work to do there, but it is a really, really difficult position. In terms of the engagement of the independent organisation, I think firstly we wanted to get agreement from everybody that that was an acceptable way forward. What I would intend to do now is I want to talk to the 2 local authorities in Wales that have already used 2 different agencies to get an idea of what their specification was, what the costs were, what the timeline was. Do we need to do a procurement exercise or can we approach people? We have been approached by one agency. So as soon as we've got a time span on that, we will get that out. We are, you know, aware that people are concerned about that. In terms of lateral flow devices, all the daycare staff do them. So they all do them prior to coming to work. There is no requirement for any other service user group apart from those people in residential homes if there's an outbreak to have a test. So there is no requirement. And all it would do is tell you that people haven't got it. It wouldn't do anything for trying to comply with the health and safety risk assessments, the social distancing, etc. So we wouldn't be planning on doing the LFDs. What I would say as well, we've got a couple of people with learning disabilities who are in our respite properties who we've had to have PCR tests done after LFDs, and it has been really quite difficult for them. It's hard to explain it. It's quite distressing. I'm sure most of you have had one. It's not something any of us would particularly enjoy. So I think that is one of the issues then, and then the accuracy of the testing coming back. So as I say, the day centre staff all do them, all our staff do them, but there's no requirement for individuals to do them.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say something there, Joe. I'd like to say thank you to all the carers out there, the care staff, because when my mum, prior to her passing away, I can't say how good they were, and they were far superior, far more caring than any outside organisation that was used with my mother, because when she had to have two come in at one time, they were superb. And so the training you must give them, they're such caring individuals as well. Just can't thank them enough. Anyway, enough of that praise. And if you pass on my thank you.
It is really nice to hear praise though when we do pass that on to the staff all the time when we get any compliments, because they
were outstanding, Joe, honestly now, and so caring. They were lovely. far superior to any sort of individual company that was used with my mother, and I can't thank them enough. So please pass on my thanks to them. I'd really appreciate if you would. Councillor Bishop. Charlotte?
Yeah, sorry, just quickly, I wanted to say thank you. I've worked in social care most of my adult life, and just a thank you for all the work you do, and I appreciate how hard it is before COVID, and there's always been issues with retail compared to social care. So I really do appreciate all the hard work you've all put in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Skivins.
Yeah, thanks. Given that our staff are, such a fantastic resource, and even from tonight's meeting, we can see they do a very good job, a very much required job. It's disappointing in that we've got the sickness levels that we have. I don't know how those numbers break down, whether it's COVID related or other sickness or other absences. Perhaps what's been a bit disappointing, perhaps for management to think about, is that I've been personally contacted by a number of care staff who were very hard working, very committed, and slightly agitated, irritated that management have taken this particular period in time to review their paying conditions. And that has also bubbled up with the union. Is this the very best timing to have launched such a project?
I think it's important to say that the review of the job description was done in line with the changes that were going on within day services. But also, one of the things that perhaps doesn't come out, it's about trying to bring parity as well across all provider services. So the staff you're talking about would be about 10 in number now, and they work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, whereas their other colleagues in domiciliary care and residential care already work extended hours over a 24-hour period. They use their cars, they administer medication, etc. So one of the things that's come to light when they've been seconded to residential home supported living properties, etc., is that there was a disparity in what they were doing and paid. So I don't think Councillor Scribbins, there will ever be a good time. But as we say, in terms of that small group of staff, that job description has now been agreed with the trade union. It will be subject to a full job evaluation process. So when we know the outcome of that, we will know any potential impact or not for that number of staff.
Okay, Councillor Skivins, is that satisfactory?
Just to say that's some useful information, but perhaps that should have been delivered elsewhere. Thanks.
Okay. Right, is there any further questions? I know, Mrs. Street, you had your hand up at one point. Was there something you'd like to comment on?
No, Chair. Joe's covered that point off much more eloquently than I would have. Councillor Etheridge did reference paragraph 2.4 of the report and my statement that I felt we'd be able to respond quick and proportionally. I think that's based on 18 months worth of experience. Every time we've faced a challenge, the Directorate, and in particular Joe and Gareth, have responded to those challenges admirably. It was important that you heard from Mr. Rowbottom today, and I wouldn't want to in any way underestimate the difficulties he or carers like him are experiencing. I wouldn't swap places with them for anything. But I can assure you we are throwing 150% at trying to resolve these problems in a set of circumstances that none of us have ever experienced before. I've been director for nearly 9 years. I worked as a senior manager, then a director for 13. And I've worked in social care for 40 odd years, and I have never seen the scale of challenges that Gareth and Joe particularly are wrestling with today on a daily basis. They're having to make decisions around where that very sparse care goes. Does it go to supporting people in care homes? Does it go to supporting people in their own homes who have no one to care for them? Or does it go to supporting people like Mr. Rowbottom's son, who equally find themselves in really difficult circumstances? So very, very challenging times. And I can't tell you how grateful I am to Gareth and Joe for their efforts.
Okay, is there any further questions or comments people would like to make regarding the report? Okay, then, well, in line with the recommendations 3.1, Social Services Scrutiny Committee members are requested to note the content of this report. Now, members, we will go back to item 8 on the agenda, which was Budget Monitoring Report, month 5, which I believe is to be reported by the Cabinet member, Councillor Cook.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Scrutiny Committee members, we'll see from the Budget Monitoring Report the social services are predicting an underspend of 671,000 at the end of month 5. It's really important to note the report was circulated for committee prior to the Welsh Government announcement of additional funding to address service pressures through the Social Care Recovery Fund. This additional funding is to be spent before the end of March, and future budget monitoring reports will therefore take account of this. The underspend referred to in the report links directly to changes in operational service delivery in response to the COVID pandemic, and as a result are unlikely to recur in future years. In addition, the underspend masks the real increases in demand, particularly around placements and supported living. I will now hand over to Mike Jones.
Thanks, Councillor Cook. Just to expand on that point around the additional grant from Welsh Government, the announcement came just as we were finalising this report, and we took the view that the additional grant funding would have to be spent on services that weren't being provided at that time. So on that basis, we took the view that it wouldn't have any impact on the bottom line of the report. So we decided to stick with the original report, which identified the underspend of £671,000. Welsh Government then subsequently changed the conditions of the grant, which allowed us to use the funding to fund additional expenditure that had been incurred since April 2021, targeted at supporting service users, care providers and the social care workforce. As a result of that change, we've included £700,000 of the overspend identified in paragraph 5.3.11 of the report in respect of the supported living placements within our spend plan that we submitted to Welsh Government to support our claim against the additional grant funding. So our total spend plan exceeded the grant allocation by 500,000 to allow it for any slippage on any of the schemes within that bid. And we were intended to use the supported living overspend as a balancing figure. So that means that anywhere between £200,000 and £700,000 of the overspend could be funded from the grant come the year end. More recently, Welsh Government have increased our grant offer to just over £4 million to extend the scope of the grant to include unpaid carers and children's services. So that means that we could use the grant to fund the £1.2 million overspend that we've identified in paragraph 5.2.3 of the report in respect of children's residential placements. By grant funding the supported living and childcare overspends, we could increase the in-year underspend to anywhere between £2.1 million and £2.6 million. However, the Recovery Fund grant is a one-off grant allocation for 2021, whereas the supported living and child placement overspends are recurring issues. So really, apart from the value in the in-year underspend, the conclusions identified in section 5.5 of the report still stand. So I think that just about covers what I wanted to highlight in terms of the additional grant funding and how it might impact on the bottom line. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any? Oh, does Gareth want to come in on this item as well?
Only to say fully support Mike's presentation of that, and obviously we're here to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions for members? Oh, I can't see any hands up. That's giving you all a free ride on this one, I think. Okay, then we will go to 3.1 of the recommendations, which is members are asked to note that the projected underspend of 671,000 against the social services budget for 21-22, inclusive of transport costs, includes a number of non-recurring underspends and attributable to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, which masks an underlying increase in demand for social care, along with significant inflationary pressures within the social care market. Whew, that was a long one for me to get out. Okay, then, I think we're going on to item 9 now of the agenda, which is the annual corporate safeguarding report 2021 to 2020-2021. And I think, Councillor Cook, you're here to give us information on this one.
Yeah, thanks again, Chair. As Chair of the Corporate Safeguarding Board, I'm really pleased to introduce the annual report for 2020-21 to committee. Members will be aware that in response to an Audit Wales review of corporate governance arrangements for safeguarding, a comprehensive action plan was developed and has been monitored through the board. It must be acknowledged that despite the challenges and delays in some areas as a result of the pandemic, progress against the actions has been made, and at the last board meeting on the 13th of September, it was agreed that the action plan would be recorded as completed. By way of reassurance to committee, the completed action plan will now be replaced by a forward work programme that will capture the key service developments to be progressed and monitored going forward. We'll hand over to Gareth Jenkins to take you through the key points. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. Committee will see that there's a huge amount of information contained in the annual report, the action plan and the covering scrutiny report. And you'll be pleased to know at this time of the evening, I'm not going to take you through that in any great detail, but I just want to pick up a few key points and draw your attention to, and then answer any questions that you may have. I think 5.2 of the report is really important to note that this was a review by Wales Audit Office, Wales Audit as they're now known, that came in to look at the corporate governance of safeguarding arrangements. So this wasn't a review of operational safeguarding practice, and it's really important that we point that out. The operational practice obviously sits with CIW, and as you know, we've got a very good track record in terms of our performance there. So this was about how you as a council and you as elected members are assured that the corporate safeguarding arrangements are robust within Caerphilly. The Corporate Safeguarding Board's main role has been to oversee the implementation of the action plan, as Councillor Cook alluded to, and that's attached to Appendix 2, and to provide support for ongoing professional and service developments across all areas of the council. The report refers to the disruption the pandemic caused to the implementation of some of the actions, but it's really positive to note that we got that back on track, so that there were delays in implementation. Some of our designated safeguarding officers, for instance, were pulled off and redeployed into other areas, so there were some delays as a result of that as well. Training was a key issue for us because obviously we like to provide safeguarding training, particularly in person, because sometimes it raises issues for individuals. Sometimes additional supports are needed to be built in, and there's something about just having those conversations in person. But what we had to do was employ different techniques. So we developed virtual training packages, videos, and particularly for the basic awareness raising, so that level 1 training, that is now available as an e-learning package and a video that can be shared. The more specialist training we continue to do either through Teams, so that there is the engagement and the interventions as you need to, and some of the more specialised training is going to be offered face-to-face going forward. Members will note that at recommendation 4 in the action plan, which is on page 52 of the pack, refers to the retrospective inputting of training data. And time had gone on so long, really, and then the pandemic hit, which delayed that. It was agreed by the board that we would park that and just agree that we weren't going to put, very valuable resource into backdating information on a system that we knew wasn't working. in the way that we wanted to, and put our investment, our time investment into recording information going forward, given that we had this kind of gap in training for about 6 months. So we saw that as an opportunity, really, so the board were happy to close that down. The September board was content, as I've said, to agree that either the actions had all been completed or the ones that were still ongoing were now core business and therefore would be maintained. But that said, as Councillor Cook referred to, we're going to replace that now with the forward work programme going forward so that we can capture all of the developments. And of course, we still need to provide evidence to Wales Audit Office of what we're doing. And our areas of future work are outlined at paragraph 519, and that's on page 47, and these will form the basis of that work programme. And this time next year, or a bit earlier, because we would have liked to bring this report probably to June or July meeting, we'll try and get that into the agenda for next summer. That forward work programme will be presented as part of the annual report for 21-22, if that makes sense. So that's about it for me, really. I'm more than happy to take any questions that you may have.
Okay, does any members have any questions or comments they'd like to add? Well, I think you get another free pass there, Gareth.
I'm not complaining.
Tough night on other subjects.
Thank you very much.
Based on that, then we'll go to the recommendations within the report, which is 3.1. Scrutiny Committee are requested to note the content of the annual Corporate Safeguarding Board report and the progress made in implementing the action plan. Okay, then, and I think now we've come to the end of our meeting. And I thought it was going to be shorter than it actually was, but turns out it was longer and very worthwhile. I think a lot of contributions on subject matters here, which are close, I think, to a lot of our hearts, and I truly appreciate all the comments made. And good luck in the next meeting, because I won't be here. I'll be out of the country, and I'll see you in the January meeting now, because I don't think there's another one before Christmas. And all have a lovely Christmas, and thank you very much for being here. Oh, hang on, Michelle.
Can I just say a quick thank you to everyone? This is my last meeting.
Oh!
And so thank you all very much for putting up with my difficult questions and actually appreciating the fact that sometimes they're not so difficult. But I found being part of this scrutiny enormously rewarding and really, really useful in the day job and the way that I've been able to share information and support our families as well. So thank you all very much for having me on board for a few years, and I wish whoever comes in after me all the luck, but they must ask some very difficult questions. I think that's key. So thank you all.
Well, that is the key of scrutiny anyway, is challenge reports and challenge everyone, I think. So yeah, ooh, Gareth, that's clever. You're gonna have to show me how to do that. That was very good. I don't know if everybody saw, but Gareth put a clapping hands on his screen. Very seeing these techno people, very good. Well, good luck anyway, Michelle, and thank you very much for being part of the scrutiny, and it's been wonderful you being part of it. And you're right, whoever comes in has to be as challenging, ask the questions, the same as yourself have. So it's been truly appreciated. And Merry Christmas, everyone, because I won't see you now at the next meeting. So, and good luck for the new year, and I'll see you in 2022. Okay, thank you very much. Good night, everyone.
Bye.